This is Corinne Cabrera, and welcome to the Microsoft Surface webinar. You are all in the right place. We're just going to wait about 2 more minutes for more people to join up, and then we'll start straight away. Thank you for your patience. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Microsoft Surface, Shield Your Hybrid IT Environment Against Sophisticated Attacks. Our speakers today will be Tran, Senior Partner Technology Strategist, Eric Veal, Surface Partner Technology Strategist, Ismar Alikadik, Enterprise Solutions Architect, and Phil Morton, Technical Solution Executive. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them in the Q&A box, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. You may also expand your slide area by clicking on the Maximize icon on the top right slide tile. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. If you can please take a moment to fill out your survey at the end of the webinar, that would be very helpful. And with that, I will pass it off to Tran to kickstart today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Corinne. Can you guys let me know if you can see the slides today? It should be on our presenters. Thumbs up, good. Eric, can you see those? All right, great. All right, so a quick look at our agenda today. Eric and myself are part of Microsoft, and we're going to talk about Microsoft as a security company. Eric will go deep in depth on Microsoft security on Surface, and then the inside team is going to come on and talk about the capabilities that they have around Surface. But first, I'm going to try to answer the question, Microsoft is a security company? I know what you're thinking. Most people, when they hear the words Microsoft, they think Windows, they think Office, and most recently, they think Azure. But believe it or not, we are a security company. If you don't believe me, let's begin with Charlie Bell. So this is Charlie Bell's LinkedIn profile. If you're not sure who he is, go ahead and go to the link. If you guys have LinkedIn, connect with Charlie. And I want you to look at his history. What you'll find is for 2.5 decades, Charlie Bell founded and ran Amazon Web Services. Today, Charlie Bell works for Microsoft. He left AWS, he joined Microsoft, and he reports directly to our CEO, Satya Nadella. It's very important that we call this out because Charlie is the Executive Vice President over our engineering team of security, compliance, identity, and access management. We've also increased our budget around security. I think we're investing about 20 billion over the next 5 years or so. And security is the biggest product that we're growing today. So not only do we have the person who has basically founded the cloud industry as we know it, he now works for us. He reports to Satya, And of course, he's going to build on security. But don't take my word for it. In fact, I'd rather you take the word from it from Gartner, Forrester, and IDC. If you're not familiar with these three, these are independent companies that go out and they write studies specifically over a number of things. Most CEOs, C-level executives, they subscribe to Gartner. And if you read Gartner, Microsoft is in 5 magic quadrants around security. That's 5. Again, we're not doing anything. This is independent research by Gartner. Next, we have Forrester. In Forrester, we are a leader in 8 Forrester waves. So the Forrester wave report is very similar to the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I urge you guys to go out there, using chat with ChatGPT and look for it. Lastly, IDC has listed us as a leader in 7 MarketScape reports. This is very important because if you are not familiar with IDC, IDC is the company that runs reports on OEM products. Because today, we're going to be talking about Surface and security on Surface. But lastly, what I wanted to do is open the news. If you read the news today, you'll find that Microsoft is making an impact in security. Recently, we identified that Chinese hackers or state hackers were trying to hack into the U.S. infrastructure. We're also helping Ukraine identify hacking by Russia. And keep in mind, the United States and Ukraine did not hire Microsoft. We simply have a security team that is looking at the signals and identifying these issues. Now, imagine if Microsoft was working for your company. But instead, we're going to talk about Surface. So the last thing I'm going to end up is not only is Microsoft investing in security, Microsoft is a security company. And with that, Eric, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tran. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar today. Excited to talk to you guys about Microsoft Surface. First, just a quick overview of who I am. I'm Seattle-based. I've been working with Microsoft off and on since 2007. I have over 20 years of experience in the IT industry, kind of from every aspect, from server security to software and a bunch of things. But for the last 3 years, I've been studying the Surface portfolio, Surface commercial devices, and I'm here today to tell you guys about how they're different and how Microsoft has designed these Windows PCs. So as Trinh mentioned, Microsoft is a security company. So we're all, of course, very familiar with Windows operating system and so many Windows choices in the market from third-party Microsoft vendors and partners that also implement Windows. But I'm going to tell you about what's different about Surface in particular and walk you through a variety of different features on the Surface portfolio that Microsoft invented for Surface or perhaps showed the industry for the first time on Surface, and then is now kind of cascading those features to the rest of the industry. As a few kind of previews of what some of those features are, to kind of list them out here, there's something you'll learn about today called Device Firmware Configuration Interface. This is an ability from the cloud, as Trinh mentions, from our Intune product to control and manage the Surface devices down to the firmware level. There's another feature in the Surface devices called the Surface Management.
Real quick, are you advancing the slides?
No, I'm just kind of giving my intro so far.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, no worries. So anyway, just, at a high level, just kind of wanted to set the table here for my talk is again about what's differentiated about Surface and features that we have built into the Surface infrastructure, really below the operating system level, and how we've designed a system that goes from the core of the system on chip in some cases, where there's a security processor called the Pluton security processor, up to the firmware level, up to the operating system, and how the cloud and device all come together to make the most secure computing experience possible. So first thing I'd like to point out is that there's many layers of security threats. So the 3 that are kind of common, the 4 that are kind of common that we think about here, starting at the bottom, scalability as we scale, and as there's new hybrid, so many more hybrid work scenarios. The pandemic really drove us in many ways to these hybrid work from home scenarios. So we have devices in many many different environments and at home, and so that's kind of scattered everything everywhere. And then we have more devices, and then these devices in many cases are of course cloud and network connected. So we have a lot of new attack vectors, and so Microsoft's very much paying attention to the changing there and what can be protected with the Windows operating system, but then in the case of Surface, what's happening below the operating system level before the machine even comes online to create and prevent things such as firmware attacks and other kind of malicious activity that can happen before the operating system is even available online. But really, you'll see that we're shipping all of the security protocols really that we can from the factory with Surface, so that you get all these different capabilities lit up from the word go. So vulnerabilities, of course, is a part of this. I mentioned the multiple devices thing, and then just these hybrid environments, work environments we have now, where I'm currently working from home, going to go into the office in a couple days, but just as my device comes and goes and on and off the network, what are the different possibilities for me to get hit by malicious attacks? And then again, what is Surface and Microsoft doing holistically to create a platform that's integrated, that solves for all these different issues? Next thing I'd like to point out is a couple of what these attack vectors are, or just kind of some examples of them. So data access issues, where we have kind of breaches and people are able to get into our networks, for example. We have hardware or software attacks. So the hardware attacks is probably what I'm mostly going to focus on today, and I'll mention again, like firmware level attacks. One thing to talk into that real quick is, you've probably heard, or perhaps heard of something called the TPM or TPM 2.0 chip. This is the Trusted Platform Module, which is a particular place on the board of a modern Windows PC where secure kind of secrets and passwords are kept, and they're kept securely. There's a distance between that and the system on chip, and we've invented a technology that was made early available on Surface, called the Pluton security processor, which is available on one of our models, the Pro 9 with 5G, which takes that TPM chip and actually bakes it into the silicon, so there's no attack vector on the surface. So we're paying very close attention to innovations in security technologies, and again, doing this at the hardware level, but then connecting that all the way up to the cloud. And then that's again a pointer. Once we get up to that operating system level, and I'll talk about some features with secured core PC, for example, that allow for the whole device to be just better managed once it is online, and people are just going about doing their work. And then, as Trinh mentioned, there's a lot going on in the world of security now, and Microsoft is very much invested in this from a chip to cloud perspective. And he mentioned Charlie there, and Charlie's background kind of as a godfather of the cloud, and somebody that's now employed by Microsoft, helping us make sure that's taken care of. But again, you'll learn more in my talk about different features of how the endpoint itself is locked down as possible. Couple just things I'll call out and then move to the next slide. But 3.86 million is the average cost of a data breach, so obviously something to avoid. There's features on the Surface devices that again come out of the box in our commercial applications, with features like BitLocker for encrypted data on the device. As I mentioned, all new or modern Surface devices that are coming out of the factory today, these are secured core PCs. I'll talk a little bit more about what that standard means and why Microsoft is ensuring that all of the PCs that it makes are secured core PCs, and some of the technologies that went into that. And move on to the 124 billion is the spend on information security. So a lot it's you don't want to get attacked. And so, unfortunately, people have to spend a lot on this, but hopefully we have solutions that are affordable and easy to deploy for you guys. And I've already made the point, but really what we're trying to say to you guys here today is that Microsoft sees itself as one Microsoft. And although there's a vast set of infrastructure in the cloud and all kinds of tools in the cloud, from Sentinel to Windows Defender and the Microsoft 365 security suite. So there's all of those technologies. But all those technologies are meant to work best with Surface, and Microsoft, because it makes Surface, is able to test all these technologies together. So you get kind of a closed ecosystem that's tested and meant to be the best possible outcome and representation of all the Microsoft technologies, whether it's Windows or Office or M365. And you'll also learn more from me in just a little bit about, again, some of these cloud features that are up there. So in Intune, there's something called the Surface Management Portal, which allows you to see your Surface device fleet from the cloud. And then I already mentioned the device firmware configuration interface, which allows IT admins in the cloud to go down to the firmware level of these Surface devices and turn off things for security applications, like maybe you don't want the cameras on, maybe you don't want the microphones on for secure applications. But all of that outcome is possible through our secure supply chain, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. And Insight is an example of a Microsoft partner that's very much a part of that. And then the people that are following me in my speech from Insight will tell you more about services from Insight, such as Windows Autopilot, that allows these secure devices that come out of the Microsoft factories to end up in end user hands using registration and deployments methods into the cloud and into Azure Active Directory, so that the most secure experience is possible, and features like DFCI can be unlocked because we have this trusted supply chain. The device you see pictured here, this is the Surface. This is obviously a side profile picture of the Surface Laptop Studio. But the Surface devices, we make them original by design. We have four main criteria that we think about when we're designing the Surface devices. They're adaptable, they're secure, they're built for powerful performance, and again, security is one of those main things that we're thinking about when we're building this portfolio that we've now been doing for over 10 years. Here you see the Surface Laptop SE extended. You see that the screen kind of unhinges there and is able to pull forward to the user. So it's both. So this is, again, one of our kind of interests is creating powerful computing technology. Of course, touch screen, ink friendly. You see in the bottom of the device there, that's the Surface Slim Pen 2. But what we're trying to do here is balance or really maximize our ability to have both a powerful computing platform, again, which you're going to get from Windows 11 and apps on top of these very powerful devices that are running a mix of Intel chips in many cases, but we also have Windows on ARM choices from Qualcomm, such as our SQ3 processor, which is in the Surface Pro 9 with 5G. But really, so these four priorities, we have Surface baked into every level. The products are designed and built with supply chain in mind. I'm going to walk through that in a little bit here. And then there's features such as Windows Hello, and through camera and facial recognition, and it's using artificial intelligence to determine that that I am who I am. And so passwordless authentication is, again, a priority that has been baked into our products for a long time. So whether that's through fingerprint reader or, again, like cameras that can do facial recognition and detect, so that there's no difference between there's nothing separate, right, to lose like a password, but it just happens to know about my face, for example, to unlock my computer. But then ultimately, again, with these cloud features and what the Surface platform provides, is the ability to manage these products from the cloud. And you'll get to see what that looks like a little bit as well. So again, here's yet another form factor of the Surface laptop studio, and this is just in clamshell laptop mode where the screen is kicked back to where it was, or just kind of a traditional laptop mode, but convertible and portable. But at this point, I want to tell you just kind of like we're going to do this kind of walk from the chip level or just the straight up hardware level. We're going to walk up the chain and just a little preview of what's next on this slide. I don't know if I click or advance. I think it paints that way. Okay, good. Sorry, just using this tool for the first time. But so just I'm going to build the whole slide and then we'll get a little bit of preview. But I'm going to talk it out here from the right to the left, going from the hardware, the Surface device itself. The question is, what have we put onto these devices at the hardware level to make them differentiated and more locked down and secure from the factory? So if you're trying to buy secure solutions, why or how you can get that from Microsoft is simply by purchasing Surface devices, Surface commercial devices through a partner such as Insight, which out of the factory come with Windows Hello. I mentioned the TPM modules, so that's throughout our portfolio here. So many of our PCs are secured core, come up to the secured core PC standard. So that's things beyond the features you even mentioned here, but include features like hypervisor, and I'm not going to remember the rest of them, but there's the secure boot is another feature that is a requirement of a secured core PC. And so you see Microsoft leading the industry by shipping everything from its factory with all these standards on by default. And we provide features on some of our models like removable solid state drives. So the hardware and the data can stay with the person if they were to return their machine, for example. So that's important for some institutions. I mentioned this Pluton security processor that's basically a TPM chip baked into the silicon itself. And I'm going to step up to the firmware level here real quick. So we have the hardware itself. So it's like what's in the actual physical infrastructure. That's one thing. And so many of us know that the first thing that kind of lights up when the thing is powered on is called firmware. So within firmware, we have something called the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface called UFI, but it's basically Microsoft makes its own firmware for these devices and manages it and can keep it updated from the cloud through Windows Update for Business. So that's powerful. You see Surface Enterprise Management Mode here. This is an alternative to using Intune as a way to control the firmware. Should people not want to do that, there's other modalities and methods to do that. And then that unlocks this thing, or that's kind of the interface to the device firmware configuration interface, which allows IT admins to control Surface device capabilities at the firmware level such that the end user would not even be able to unlock their, say, for example, their camera or their microphones if IT admins wanted to distribute them that way. And so your Insight team is going to be able to walk you through those scenarios depending on like how secure you want to make these endpoints. They can provide those sorts of outcomes. So ultimately, we get up to the operating system level, and this is where we talk more about secured core PC. The FASR word here is firmware attack surface reduction. So this is Microsoft prioritizing attack surface. So we want less attack surface. So we're doing everything we can in engineering these systems to have fewer vulnerabilities. And so a lot of work goes into that at the operating system level. But you get features here. I mentioned HVCI. VBS is virtualization-based security, I believe. Features like secured boot, BitLocker I've mentioned. So we're just turning all this on at the factory so that when they ship into end users' hands, it's all there and ready to go. And then, again, from the cloud perspective, you get unlock. It allows it to tie into that Surface device that the people have, or many at scale, where you have the Surface Management Portal. You have which allows for firmware management, and then features from the cloud, like Windows Update for Business, allow those updates to hit the firmware, allow those updates to hit the operating system, so the whole platform is secure as can be. And somehow I went full screen. Ooh. Hey, Tran, can you unmute? I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. I just went full screen somehow, and I don't know.
Yeah, you're
I'm
on the yellow slide that says
okay.
surface taste and approach.
Okay, I think I'm good. I'm just going to keep proceeding slide at a time here. So thanks everybody. So the what I'd like to walk you through now is I'm going to call this like the business side of Surface. In other words, when we think of our secure supply chain, that's one thing. When you think about the cloud, you might think about data centers and these large buildings and sites that get built that have all these servers in it. So there's one way to look at security from that perspective. But when you're looking at devices, you can see on this picture here. So this is an example of a lab used by Microsoft. You see, this thing looks pretty squeaky clean, but Microsoft is very much, looking all the way back into its supply chain. And I think that's a tie to, modern commentary about, say, like Chat GPT and how does compute happen. But we, of course, are prioritizing security as a fundamental principle with, a zero trust culture. And so in the case of devices, this goes all the way back to where did these components come from and how do we know that we can trust our suppliers? So first of all, we're doing everything we can to minimize risk during assembly. So through different management techniques and just quality assurance, we're ensuring that the components are true and right and just and secure and all those kinds of things. The second step kind of along the journey here is that suppliers security. And so an example of suppliers here in the Surface world, I'm going to talk about North America, which is what I most know. We have 3 authorized device distributors. Those are Ingram Micro, TD SYNNEX, and D&H. And so that's kind of basically once they come from Microsoft's hands and from the kind of the factory's hands, they ultimately go become possessed, or they become the property of our distribution partners. And then from there, they go to partners like Insight. And then from there, they go to customers like yourselves. So, we're monitoring that whole process. We have, a lot of rigor on top of the whole supply chain. And then, of course, relationships with organizations like Insight that can provide these devices at scale, configured and deployed into your clouds or your environments as needed. And then, again, keep walking along here. So security-focused logistics and distribution deliver Surface devices to the resellers. So as I mentioned, I've been involved in Surface since 2020. About 6 months into the pandemic is when I joined this job, and it's been fascinating and fun to be involved in something that does have physical supply chain attributes. But I've been very impressed by, I think, just all the rigor and really process that goes into delivering these devices at scale and again securely. And then very thankful for, I think, just how robust this whole platform is. I truly believe in what we're providing, that it is designed to be secure from chip to cloud or core to cloud. I think I covered that. And then this is, I guess, a little bit of a recap, right? So we're kind of starting from the beginning in our factories, making sure that everything's secure. And then the supplier security is continuously monitored. So we have all kinds of approaches and methods in place to ensure secure delivery. And then the folks from Insight that are going to go after me, they're going to tell you guys more about services from Insight, such as they have a device as a service capability. They have a dare to compare capability where they can get you Surface devices to test out in your environment to kind of just see what the difference is. And, we fully believe that you're going to notice the difference and hopefully we'll want to transact on that basis. But then again, finally, the security focused logistics with our distribution partners ultimately deliver these secure devices. And my point there, again, I won't be covering in my talk too much about Windows Autopilot, but that's very much a way that this works, that Windows Autopilot is the way by which devices go from being kind of bricks that come from a factory to becoming cloud managed devices that have been deployed with high trust, such that features on the cloud side in the far end, if you will, are unlocked, like DFCI essentially requires Windows Autopilot deployment through our secure supply chain and partners like Insight. So here we see the laptop studio again, beautiful device. This device has on it a feature called Windows. I was going to say Windows Studio. It's called Voice Clarity, but this was one of the first devices that had an AI feature on the client side built in that allowed for a voice, like more advanced noise cancellation for things like leaf blowers. And then it also did a good job if I were to move away from my microphone, that the people on the far end would still hear my voice at the same volume level. It also suppresses things like clapping and other just kind of noise. But Windows 11 is a big part of this. All of the Surface devices these days are shipped with the latest, bits from Windows 11, and there's almost there's like basically no bloatware that's shipped with these. We just do factory image. It's a clean image of the latest Microsoft Windows 11, version, and so those come from the factory. We also still do provide choice for customers that might want a Windows 10 option. So ask your Insight team about that should you need a downrev version. But you're going to get the latest kind of updates and, of course, capabilities if you choose Windows 11, which is a secure operating system. And just build this slide out real quick. So, again, Surface provides Windows 11 features, and turned on, as I mentioned, the secured core PC features are turned on, such as HVCI, VBS, and the secure boot capabilities are just turned on within the factory. So you can have the most secure device, and just everybody in Microsoft is kind of aware to turn those things on or off, disable as needed. And then the security is booted and authentic. So we're just ensure that it's all good to go. We're happy with the device that we're going to ship. So that happens. And then ultimately, through all of this combination of security features, the outcome is a 60% reduction in malware and just ability for hackers ultimately to kind of take over your PC and load it up with junk and garbage that you don't want. So again, just getting back to secure modern work. So that all results in this secured PC. And then a little bit more, kind of getting a little bit more technical now. So this is our firmware. This is a slide about our firmware. It's called the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. Microsoft this is an open standard. UFI is something that many companies, I guess, implement. UFI is just kind of the modern firmware methodology, but Microsoft has taken that open standard, applied it to Surface, manages that source code, and as new attack vulnerabilities are detected, that source code is able to be fixed ASAP. And then through Windows Update for Business, for example, those fixes can be sent out to the Surface devices at scale. So again, Microsoft is a security company. Microsoft is looking at these signals like Trinh mentioned, the kind of international stuff that's going on, and then is able to keep its devices that it makes, Surface, updated and fixed ASAP using, again, this strategy of chip to cloud technology. So I think that's a pretty important one. A couple last slides here. So this is not a super clear picture of but this is in Intune, but this is called the Surface Management Portal, and what people would see as Microsoft 365 cloud users or Azure users in seeing their list of devices here. And they're able to see things like operating system version, device health, when the device was, say, online or things of that nature, but they're able to manage their fleet and in that way protect their assets. So that's a very powerful cloud feature that, again, like if these Surface devices are deployed into Active Directory and managed by Intune, then we unlock all these things. So again, provides Windows Update. I've mentioned the device firmware configuration interface. This is something you'll want to work with your Insight partner to make sure that you deploy kind of to your cloud from them, so that it unlocks that DFCI capability, a thing called High Trust. And then finally, so you see Autopilot mentioned here again. The new name for Endpoint Manager is Intune. We kind of keep going back and forth on that, but a remote reset capability, right? So end of life, an IT admin from the cloud side can just, zap a device and redeploy it to a different user, for example. So that's very powerful. This screen shows what does it look like to use device firmware configuration interface in the cloud to disable some features like local admin, microphones, cameras. So a variety of just control mechanisms here that some regulated industries, for example, might really need or want. I'll just walk through real quick these examples that they mention on this slide. So I mentioned disabling cameras and mics for applications like manufacturing. And then we have for kiosk devices, it might be nice to disable boot to USB. Again, this is all from the cloud, whether, so your IT admins can just, for a collection of devices, set a policy or a profile for these devices that allow these features to just be off, and they just adhere to or kind of bind to that configuration profile. And then finally, just in out-of-box settings, you can disable local user access, which you can imagine. It's like you send out a PC, it has local admin on it, and well, there it went, so people, the end user just gets it and installs and does everything or anything that they want. So that's another benefit of, again, DFCI and Windows Autopilot. So that's the end of my talk. I'm going to hand off to the Insight team now. It's great to be able to speak to everybody. Thankful to be able to talk to you today about my excitement for Surface and how it does bring this chip to cloud security story to life and protect against these different types of attack vectors that happen below the operating system. Again, one I mentioned is this attack to TPM chips that is mitigated through Pluton security processor, where that processor is baked into the actual silicon itself. That you can find that on the Surface Pro 9 with 5G. And then I hope at a high level you guys took away some just more knowledge. You saw the laptop studio there and its different form factors. So you can see that it's both like an extremely attractive, powerful device, but also built for security. So with that, I'd like to hand off to the Insight team for more info on services and Autopilot, that stuff.
Thank you, Eric. That was some good information on the Surface device. My name is Phil Morton. I work in the Modern Workplace Division of Insight. And Insight, now that we're excited to potentially purchase our Surface devices, right, how are we going to control those, deploy them, manage them? And that's really where Insight comes in. We are an SSI, a super solution integrator. And basically that means that, Insight can really help your organization from purchasing Office 365 licenses to procuring Surface devices, helping to deploy them, but also, advanced level projects or migration or DevOps or Azure build outs, and also managing all of that, right? That's one of the challenges we see in today's environment is how do we manage all of this? Now, since we're here in the Surface session, right, it tells me a couple of things right off the bat about potentially your organizations. To me, Surface is a premier device. They are a great user experience. And so your organization probably cares a lot about the end user experience. And in today's world, that is becoming very important, right? We have the younger workforce coming in, and they really want to have a good experience with their device and the services we're deploying to them. And Surface is really going to help in that area of providing that premier experience for the user. But also it tells me that, you and your organization care about security. Surface, as we saw from the discussion with Eric, is built into the device physically and at the OS level. So from the ground up, the Surface device is one of the most secure devices that we can deploy to our users. But how do we go beyond that, right? Because typically what I see is when we're looking at a refresh of devices or looking to purchase Surface devices, the discussion tends to expand outside of that, right? We know that the device itself is very secure and the OS is very secure, but then it starts to expand into how do we protect from user behavior? How do we protect our data and govern our data and make sure that our user is compliant with our data? How do we move beyond just the physical security of Surface and start using the EDR services with Office 365 and the other security and compliance stacks around Office 365 and Azure? So that typically leads us into an expanding discussion outside of just the Surface device. And this is where Insight can really help your organization to develop a roadmap, a future state guide for your organization, something to help you stay on path of that modern workplace journey, right? So building that roadmap out and giving you the guidance to help you phase it out and take an approach, a metered approach to implementing modern workplace environment. And how does Insight do that? We do a repeatable project management methodology. And typically that's going to start with envisioning. We could have dedicated envisioning sessions, centered around maybe just device management, right? We see it, that's where typically the modern workplace journey might start, is a device refresh. Do we really want to continue managing these brand new devices with our legacy method of imaging or using third-party software to manage these devices? Instead, let's take this brand new device and let's look at the Intune capability and start moving to modern management methods. We could also do workshops, right? And I think it's important that your organization understands the true capabilities that we have with Intune and the cloud controls. Sometimes it can be challenging just to stay up to date on everything and all of the new features that Microsoft is rolling out. So the envisioning session will give you a deep understanding of what is the capabilities, and that's really driving our roadmap and the future state goals. And then we would move into kind of our design and implement and deployment phase, where we're tackling these projects and actually rolling out services, deploying the Surface devices, and then going into modern management methodology for those devices. But there's another component here, and that is also end user adoption, end user training. Insight, along with your organization, could do everything perfect on the back end of deploying everything, getting all the services built out, configuring the Surface devices just how the users need them. But if we roll that out to them but don't give them any change management or training and kind of help them adopt these new services, from an end user standpoint, they're going to view this as a failure, even though we've implemented everything on the back end perfectly. So it's very important to keep the end user in mind. But even if we get to all of that state, now we need to manage the Surface devices, or we need to manage the new compliance and security policies that we put in place. And a lot of times what we see at Insight is that administrators, it's not that they're lacking the skills, but they're just lacking the time. We see a lot of IT environments are running very lean nowadays. And so Insight has a managed service division, and we can help your organization really manage the new features, the cloud features, the brand new devices, but really take away that day-to-day task from your administrative staff and allow them to focus on future projects and driving the business forward, and allow Insight to kind of do that everyday management. Now, I'd like to, since we're kind of talking about a managed service here, I would like to go through one scenario, right, which would be kind of a device as a service, managed endpoints, and as Eric alluded to earlier, autopilot is a big part of that. Now, we have two main scenarios we see. One is new hires, right? And maybe you just have a few hiring people here and there, and that might be easily dealt with. But if you're a very large organization, you potentially might be hiring, 50 or 100 people a month, and that can become challenging to constantly be dealing with new devices and provisioning and ordering and logistics around that. Or we also see the device refresh. Even if your organization just has 1,000 users, if you're going to refresh 1,000 devices in 12 months, that's still a lot of work. And so this is where Insight can come in, autopilot can be utilized, and we'll actually help you set up your Intune tenant to support, say, potentially your Surface devices. But along with that, we can have a self-service portal. So we have ServiceNow at Insight, and we can integrate, say, potentially with your ServiceNow or whatever kind of system on the back end that your organization uses. And we can also build a self-service portal. So your users could come to the Insight self-service portal and answer a few persona questions, and then that's going to drive the choices that we give to them for what type of devices they're allowed to say, yes, I want this type of Surface device or this type of mobile device. Because not everyone needs, a Surface Pro book with 32 gigs of RAM. And kind of according to what type of questions we're asking and what type of your answers are is going to drive what type of devices we would present to that user. Even from an executive scenario, right? We know, okay, we're not going to offer them the lowest level Surface, right? We're going to make sure they have kind of that Surface Elite experience. And so it really can be persona driven off the self-service portal. But also mobile devices can be a part of that as well. And once they pick those devices, now the process is flowing. It's called Insight Lab Services, can really start helping provisioning, procure the devices, provisioning them, getting them set up, and kitting them and getting them ready to be shipped out. And let's take a closer look at that. And like I mentioned, even if you're just a small to medium business to a large business, dealing with inventory can be very troubling. It's a lot of work for the IT staff, and it's work that we don't necessarily want them doing. We want them focusing on driving business use cases and moving the business forward, not spending their time dealing with, shipping and unboxing devices and potentially imaging them from the legacy method and then reboxing them up and then having to ship them to the user's house. So that into itself is a lot of logistical handling for the devices, and why would we want our IT staff doing that? So at Insight, you could pre-purchase your devices. They could be shipped to Insight at our Insight Lab facility, and we would store them in a secure locker environment, and they would be your devices, not used for any other organization. And then when we receive an order, say you have 50 refresh devices that need to go out next week. Well, we would pull them out of your inventory, unbox them. We would start the autopilot pre-provisioning process so that we're basically removing 80 or 90% of that autopilot work from the user. So when they receive the device, it's almost ready to go. At that point, we can also integrate with your asset tagging system. We can also have kits developed so that maybe your organization wants to ship a laptop bag, a mouse, and a docking station, and then have it asset tagged. So Insight is fully capable of kitting those devices up, repackaging them, and then shipping them potentially to the user's regional office or even directly to the user's house. And once they receive that device, they're going to go ahead and unbox it, turn it on, and then it's going to be about a 5 or 10 minute experience to finish up the autopilot process. But within 10 minutes, they're going to be at a logon page, signing into their device. At that point, their profile is going to be in place. Their applications will be coming down. And typically, the applications will already have been laid down in the deployment service section when Insight is initiating the autopilot pre-provisioning process. So that's why I was saying most everything will be laid down on the device by the time the user receives it. And then at that point, the user is ready to go and they can start working. Within 10 or 15 minutes, they'll be working away. And that typically is from the time that we see an order initiated, it's about a 3-day time, 2 to 3 days before the device is shipped out. The Insight Labs facility is capable of processing about 1,500 devices per day. So we'll kind of cover that in the use cases, the example, but they are very capable at helping with device refreshes. That moves us into our Insight case studies, and we just have one more slide, and then we'll have some time for any questions and answers if there is any. I'm not going to read word for word on this slide, but I think it's just important to understand that even if you're just a small to medium-sized company, all the way up to a Fortune 100 company, Insight has small and medium-sized clients. I have clients who are just 500, and they use our Insight Lab service. They use our autopilot service. They use device as a service. Because typically, if you're in a small company with, say, 500, you might only have 2 or 3 IT staff they just don't have the time and the bandwidth to provision, 100 devices in 1 year. And so we work with anywhere from small-sized companies all the way up to very large telecom companies with 100,000 plus employees, and they're potentially worldwide, right? So we're able to support all of those companies and in between with the Insight Lab services. And one of the key things that really makes this possible is autopilot. Is the fact that we can provision these devices. We're not using a legacy method where we're using SCCM or USB drives to image them. Right? We want to utilize Intune autopilot service. And last year, Insight deployed, I think, well over 300,000 devices with autopilot, and we're expecting that to probably double this year. So we have a very extensive experience with provisioning, deploying Surface devices, mobile devices. And so, definitely I think it's worth reaching out to your Insight representative and kind of we can give you some more material on our Insight Lab services and our device as a service. The device as a service is very interesting too because it really helps take the device from the inception all the way to the end of life, where you would even ship that device back to Insight and we would wipe that device clean and then properly dispose of that. So that's the end of my presentation, Trin, and thank you everybody for taking the time to attend our session today. And if there's any other questions or comments, we still have a few minutes left for that.
Thank you, everyone. It looks like we have some questions from the audience. What does DFCI stand for?
That's the device firmware configuration interface. So yeah, as a reminder, that's from my talk. So that's a feature that gets unlocked in Intune when partners like Insight deploy devices using Windows Autopilot into the cloud. So the Surface devices get actually deployed to the client's Azure Active Directory tenant by the partner. So again, we have a trusted relationship with our distribution partner and then with our reseller partner, in this case, Insight. So that device lands in the customer's Active Directory tenant where users and resources and computers all live, kind of in a database there. But that capability, again, like by using Windows Autopilot, it allows for a feature in Intune, which allows for the ability to turn off cameras. And again, like that kiosk scenario, it also, again, like can prevent the ability for the end user to log in as an admin, which is like, that's kind of the start of everything. If you give the keys to the teenager, you never know what you're going to get. So, these kinds of more secure and robust scenarios are possible through Surface and Windows Autopilot, resulting in features like DFCI that can be unlocked in the cloud. Long answer, but that's the answer.
And Eric, this is Phil Moore. I wanted to add on to that, kind of what you were mentioning with Autopilot. As a Microsoft partner, we would have the ability to go ahead and upload all of your new purchase devices into your Autopilot and Intune tenant. So your administrative staff, IT staff, doesn't even have to really know or even see or touch these devices. We could literally receive them, input them into your tenant, configure them, ship them out to the user, and your IT staff actually never touched them or saw that device one time.
Yeah, and I think to just piggyback on that, right? It's the old way used to be imaging and ghost USB kind of sneaker net kind of stuff where people would have a golden image and this kind of stuff. But Windows Autopilot is cloud driven, so these profiles and differences in users and differences in departments, it's able to just take a computer profile and allow a partner like Insight to just like give that profile to the end user ultimately. And whether they unbox it and use the pre-provision, like you said, and kind of get in there and do the initial downloading, or you can do it zero touch where they never even unbox it. They scan the box and assign it to a user and happiness occurs.
Thank you very much. And I feel you've already answered the second question I had for you, which was, what are the benefits of Windows Autopilot?
Oh, okay, great. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, my brief one on that is it creates a tighter, more closely knit relationship between Microsoft and the end customer through partners like Insight that can provide value-added services like everything that was just explained to you on the back of this protocol, which again, like the devices are secure from the factory. They eventually wind up in the hands and in the secure locker, like was explained from Insight, but they can be directly deployed to the customer's cloud tenant. And then from there, again, like just depending on what's the appetite for the customer's IT admin to do stuff or not, that can be negotiated with a partner like Insight. And so Microsoft can provide secure devices at scale and then work with fantastic partners like Insight to get better things done for customers.
Thank you.
I just want to add on to that as well. This is Phil Morton. Is one of the best things about Autopilot is that we're using the OEM image that we receive from Microsoft. So there's no need to keep driver packages or firmware packages or update the application packages. We're using literally what Microsoft is giving us, and the Intune is just doing the configuration of that OS to make it look and feel as you want it. So it would look and feel as if we imaged it, but it's really just policy driven on the back end from Intune. So no more maintaining images or any maintaining applications or drivers and firmware packages. So it's really the best of both worlds.
Thank you. And what are 3 criteria for secured core PC?
This is like a trick question for me. So HVCI is one. That's hypervisor is the HV in HVCI there. Another one is a feature called Secure Boot. And then a third for secured core PC would be VBS, which is virtualization-based security. But it's kind of a mix of Windows features as well as, again, these hardware features that Microsoft has created the standard, again, called secured core PC, and then is adhering to the standard as it creates new Surface models and again, produces these devices at scale and gets them into end customers' hands. But it's you could search around for it, but there's maybe like 7 criteria for secured core PC. I've listed a few.
Thank you. And that covers all of our questions. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you'd like to review the presentation, please check out our on-demand page for more. Don't forget to take the time and answer the poll questions provided. Thank you for attending and have a good day.
Thank you.